More than 7 years now, they had lived under the fiery threats and the bullying of Kilauea volcano, pouring its 2,000-degree molten rock out through the loud, gaseous vents, Pu'u'o'o and Kupainaha. Many of those who came to live under the mountain on Hawaii's Big Island admired the overpowering beauty all around them and gave little thought to the geologic upheaval, the terrible internal forces that created that wonderment, the dramatic but destructive eruptions that gave us that patchwork of escarpment and plain, black sand beach known as Kalapana. But by daylight on that January morning in 1983, a new apprehension hung heavy in the air, already stinky and acrid with sulfur and the residue of burned brush and ohia tree. Those who had been here when the 1977 flow stopped just behind the Congregational Church looked at the smoke from the vent and used local wisdom to judge the speed of this lava. And they went home, and the older Hawaiians among them prayed. The one who eats the forest was back, and those who foolishly built in the forest would not be spared. Kalapana might have been called the last Hawaiian place, if the island of Ni'ihau had not already laid claim to that name. In the early 60s, the little community of Hawaiian speakers who fished or raised cattle in lush surroundings at the edge of the sea was still stereotypical of what most mainlanders imagined Hawaii to be. The isolation, the beauty, the closeness of its then locals-only families are what drew youthful filmmaker Martin Charlot there right out of high school.
Hawaii is the most distant landmass in the whole world, and Kalapana is the most distant spot in that distant landmass. So you're really in the last spot in the world. When people used to say Timbuktu, they were really talking about Kalapana. It had its own pace. It had its own time. Days would last forever. You'd walk the streets. Nobody was in a hurry. If you would sit down with somebody for a few hours and have a conversation, I would be quiet and they'd be talking in Hawaiian, and for literally a few hours, you'd go to the next house and somebody would say, "Oh, what did you talk about?" And suddenly they'd go in like a tape recorder and word for word, repeat everything that was talked about.
Hardly anybody had even written anything about Kalapana in those years, let alone make a film. This is the only film record of those years before disaffected young mainlanders started moving in during the Vietnam War. And it's the only film record of Kimo Kekaula as a youngster. Later he went off to fight his country's war and was killed in action. When filmmaker Charlot went back this month, he observed,
what was interesting is that a lot of the older people had survived the youth. The youth had died in Vietnam. Robert, who is in the film doing the pig chase, had died in a bar fight. So it was interesting to run into all the old faces and say, hey, where is Kimo? Where is Robert? And find they weren't with us anymore.
Any outsider stood out in the Kalapana of that time, but few ever came. They remember Charlot not just for his film, but also for his rather odd attire.
Having grown up in Hawaii at that time when I was a teenager, one of my things was to prove my howliness. So I'd walk around in a coat and a tie, and I'd go peehee hunting in a coat and a tie, and it was sort of the costume of my race.
One day in 1964, Sam Kamahui was startled by some unusual sounds. The bulldozers and the earth movers had come to build the bypass highway and to open the last Hawaiian place for subdivisions. The state, the county, and eager developers joined hand in hand to encourage settlement of this corner of the Big Island. And for Sam and the Sweezies and the Kauhis and the Pavaus, things would change rapidly and not necessarily for the better.
I suppose an obvious question is, why did people move here in the first place and ignore an active volcano just up the hill? Well, one answer is that a lot of them knew about it, they just didn't care. Kalapana is a special, remote kind of place, and the volcano added just that little touch of danger. Another is that those were land boom times. Lots of people in or connected to government were working with real estate developers, and if you didn't ask, The sellers sure weren't going to tell you about the volcano.
Brochures mentioned spectacular waterfalls, colorful orchids, sweeping fields of sugarcane, towering coconut palms, and the finest deep-sea fishing in the world. The houses that supposedly would be built here were highly idealized. Senate President Nelson Doy, who was also to be a judge and lieutenant governor, was the lawyer for Kalapana developers. House Finance Chairman Jack Suwa was a shareholder. Other name backers, George Ariyoshi, Arthur Ishimoto, Mrs. Jack Mizuha, John Ushijima, and the parents of County Supervisor Herbert Matayoshi. So when the great fissure opened and the lava began to roll downhill like a river seeking union with the sea, it would have been interesting to have been inside the heads of all those developers who hawked the land and all those political figures who eagerly went along with the selling of Kalapana District. The red-hot river moved first on Royal Gardens like it had eyes, following a traditional lava trail. Soon those developer promises of a premium investment would seem to have been a joke. The promises of a lifetime in the Kalapana paradise would turn to ashes. There are 850 active volcanoes in the world, and 2 of them are in Hawaii. Both erupted in a 2-year period in the 1980s. And as this river of lava spread wider and deeper down the steep slope of Kilauea, Royal Gardens would once again be on the front line. You can't say the front line of defense because, as the developers' brochures had not pointed out, there is no defense against this superheated liquid rock. Royal Gardens had been hit before, but this time the eruption did not stop, and the lava did not cool on the leading edges, and the geology experts shook their heads and calculated the volume of lava and knew that this subdivision would be covered by it. As the strange assortment of people who had moved to this most precarious community of mostly loners evacuated, police set up roadblocks to keep out the looters and the curious, to make sure the more goofy members of the settlement did not try to go back in. There had been incidents of dopers saying they wanted to stay and to be swallowed up and made part of the orange glow. Quickly, the one who eats forest began eating houses. The subdivision would be annihilated. The land that Norman Inaba bought for $200,000 and may have brought a gross return of $16 million would be useless for another 150 years. Having punished Royal Gardens, the lava moved across the highway and covered Queen's Bath. Not the real Queen's Bath, which is little known and located to the north of this very famous site, but a favored swimming hole, man-made, for locals and tourists. It was covered with a hissing vengeance. And then it slopped over the jagged shoreline cliffs and poured into the ocean, releasing clouds of steam filled with hydrochloric acid. The final irony is that although it had taken land away from the people who tried to claim it up mountain, now as the orange fingers slid into the water and quickly cooled and crackled, new land was being created. Many acres of new land would replace some of the big island, which was eroded by wind and rain and waves and the slump of the mass of the volcano. And just a handful of miles away at sea, in about 5,000 feet of water, a new force was underway. University of Hawaii oceanographer Alex Malenhoff was recording the eruption of an undersea volcano building toward the surface and creating a new island that someday we shall call Loihi. It will be visible from Kalapana.
Okay, Tom, we're at Pele's Vents at 980 meters, over.
The lava was advancing, but unless you got up in the air, you could not appreciate the size of the danger. It was a fast flow. It was relentless and widening. In the early stages, there was hope because it bypassed some of the first houses closest to the vent. But on the flatlands, two separate flows broke out, almost as if they were seeking houses that might have been spared. But in the days and the weeks and months ahead, this depressing scene would be repeated over and over. Lava eating at rock walls, finally pouring over the walls, burning its way through ordinary lives. From then on, it never stopped. It was like seeing funeral after funeral.
Mary, what does it feel like to live next to a volcano like this?
It feels good to live here. I like to live here. It's beautiful. We're living on a place where it's still growing and it's still, getting bigger and stronger all the time. It has to take a little to get some, I guess.
And I stayed up till about 2 in the morning. We played real loud drum music that is from the band Kalapana that they used to play here, and we played it with the tape, everything, and watched the flow come down in the middle of the night. And it was just like a huge amount of wax coming at you, like real glowing red wax and orange wax, and this huge, wall of it coming down the hill. It was so bright at night. And I've got a better view back then than I have. When I lived here, I was afraid of it. I just didn't even want to go look at it. I'm not looking at that stuff.
Did you? Huh? You want one of those too? Okay. Then you guys go play the part. Heide, did you get any request from for the Humane Society?
No.
Yeah. All right.
I've been living here for 2 years with Craig Heiser, but then I moved out and rented a house behind them, and both of them are gone now. I guess just because of it was a rental. I mean, I feel bad for Lynn, the owner, and everything, but the house that I put all the energy in got moved. So I don't feel as, stressed out about losing,
Some people moved, and moving companies chipped in their help free.
I can't believe how fantastic they pack. It's just unbelievable. They're really doing a great job.
That by itself. You're insured then?
Yes, on both houses, thank goodness.
And did you ever think this would happen? You ever think the lava would come rolling down Government Road?
No, I really didn't. I didn't think it ever would touch that road.
Oh, big ooze, wow.
Too heavy.
Let's see.
Here you go, Mary. Should I lock it up?
No.
How long you live up here?
10 years.
You built it by hand, by yourself?
Yeah.
How you feeling?
Oh, disappointed.
Yeah.
Really disappointed, but I'll build another place.
This isn't supposed to happen to me. This is supposed to be the people on TV and in the newspaper. And now it's really happened. And I really can't. I'm just kind of standing here and it's right there. And I still think I'm going to wake up tomorrow in my bedroom and everything's going to be here. And I don't know what's going to happen when I wake up and it's not. We're just really close. It's a really close community right here. And I don't know if we're jokingly saying it or not, but we all want to go somewhere together.
This is one of the most beautiful spots in Hawaii. And you look up the hill and it's just this black river.
We love each other here. And that's the hardest part for all of us. You know, okay, I'll get the money to rebuild the house. But where? And where's everybody else going to be? And that's the hardest part. That's real hard.
The loss of Royal Gardens and Kalapana Gardens was one thing. The fact that the lava would now take the very heart of old Kalapana village as well was hard to take. The Catholic and Congregational churches and Walter and Maisie Yamaguchi's Kalapana store were symbolically the last stand. Now, Walter and some of the others do believe in the Pele legend.
We realized today there's no coming back after this. Pele is here.
Well, the lady is going to come down. She's going to stop at Walter's for a bite to eat. She's going to stop by, say a prayer, and then she's going to go for a swim.
Others emphatically do not.
My dad taught us never to worship Pele, never, but to worship God, because he's the creator of this land.
What's Madam Pele going to do?
He's going to clear the land behind for me, leave the flat lava, so the visitors can see right from my store. Come over here, have a drink and food and stand by, so I have more people coming. I think she's going to do that way to me. Maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think so.
And those who seem to view all this from some time warp.
She's pissed, man.
Really?
And he's down the road. I can tell that already. Scratch another one.
Walter Yamaguchi evacuated his store only under county order, and when Maisie told him he was crazy if he didn't try to save what he could. The lava picked up speed in town. The hottest issue in town was whether Star of the Sea Church, or Painted Church as it's commonly called, should be moved from the site where Father Everest Gielan had built it in 1930 for $2,500.
I was baptized in this church, and I got married on the 25th anniversary. And the third anniversary, I got 50 years old, we remarried again. Third time I married in this church. So I still today, God's sake, I love God, that He won't move the church.
If the lava covers it, we still have the memory in our hearts. But if we move it, we know it's there for the rest of our children. And it's been here for how many years? So this is my opinion. Move it. God's help.
The bishop's decision was to move it. The congregation generally agreed, although some of the Protestants across the street at Mauna Kea Church thought it was a terrible idea. They would leave their church in place. The lava finally moved on the Black Sand Beach and Harry K. Brown Park. It heated and filled the ponds where the boys Kimo and Robert played in those days before the subdivisions. On May 18th, it started all over again. The very day that President Bush declared Kalapana a disaster area, the main rift zone vent churned to life and began sending 650,000 cubic yards of lava every day through the tubes left by the previous flow and down toward the village. As the flow emerged on the flatland, it uncannily shifted direction, seeming to seek out and destroy the houses it had missed earlier. Walter Yamaguchi said, "It will not take my store, guaranteed." And he was right, again. The lava skirted east of both the Kalapana store and the Mauna Kea church. Kalapana, old-timers like to say, is really just a state of mind. The church paintings of Father Gielan and an artist from Vermont known only as Mr. George are spared for future generations. But some of the old-timers say they are glad the lava came to cleanse their community. Many were dismayed at all the outsiders who moved in, shocked by the drug culture, embarrassed by the skimpy women's clothing that clashed with the modesty of the native Christian element.
It was a very happy place. The Catholic, the Mormons, and the Protestants, we all joined together. There was no separation from one another. And I'm glad that my dad, they're not here to see the trauma, because it's a great difference now. It's not like now, it's like a jungle. It wasn't like that.
Imagine your town, your house, your childhood burned or dismantled as you watched.
The land is being destroyed, the coastal area is being changed, but some of the feelings these people got, it'll carry. Just like Kapoho died as a community in 1960, but Kapoho is still there when you go and talk to some of the residents. And when you hear the word Kalapana, Kaimu, Kapa'ahu, I think automatically when these guys talk about it, they're going to project so much warmth, feeling, and memories of goodness to their place. Kalapana will be forever.